In this exercise, I'm replacing one that there was in the book where they were moving images of book covers. I didn't like that because it was pixel-based, and that doesn't give you any opportunity to be responsive. I wanted my carousel-type slideshow to be somewhat responsive. It's not perfect. To get better on the responsiveness, I would have to go a little deeper into the CSS and HTML, because you can see I've got things sort of squishing together here when I get too close together, and eventually the arrows move. So I would have to add in some additional media queries where I change the column sizes, because right now it's a 1:10:1 column layout, and what I'd want to do is I'd want to hide the columns with the arrows and drop in a row with arrows on top, and possibly do some more reformatting to get down to font size. Right now it's good if my phone is sideways, but there isn't really much more to do to the JavaScript. The rest is HTML and CSS things I need to do. And since this is a JavaScript exercise, I'm not going to focus on those. But I wanted to work with percentages. And you can see it works pretty well. It does one funky thing I'm not in love with. You're going to see it now. This just appears instead of sort of sliding in, because that's the first slide. So it's moving across here. Now this is actually out on the internet. You can always go look at it. prg147mccdgm.net, simple-animation. But I want to show you how it's set up, and this is kind of important for the slider. So I have, let's pull up the index for a second here. I have a class container, I have main, which is in a row. My left button is class column 1, so the whole, and I want to show this one locally on my computer. The whole left column is a button. Gives me a bigger hit area than just the arrows. Same thing for the right button. Right now I don't have the left one coded. That's sort of left to you guys to do on your own. But it has a bigger hit area. Now below it, it cuts off, but it's all good above it. It gives you a nice large hit area. What's happening in the background here? So again, 1 column, 10 columns, 1 column. I have a large panel, which I call a slider, which I set to 500 times the size of the main section. Let's take a look to see what it's doing. I need to go through the different CSS. So in my slider, I have what I called slots. They're set to 20% of the width of the slider. They float left. It's a display inline block. I want them stacked right next to each other. This is my center area. This is where the overflow is being hidden. This is what's going to show you what's really happening. And I can go out here and I can refresh. And you'll see that this actually has all of the images, and they're set up so that the photo is in the middle, and each image slot, which is what I called these, takes up 100% of the visible space. But it's actually a 500% wide div that has 20% divs in there, because the percentage is the percentage of the larger container. So each of these slots, which I called them, have a margin 15 pixels, top and bottom, 0 left and right. They're a width of 20%. The slider, which is my slide container, has to have a relative position, and it has a width of 500%. So if you have 10 photos, you'd make it a width of 1,000%. And then you'd change each inner slot to be 10%. So yes, guys, you do have to do math. But this works pretty much the way I want, to have one long div that I'm moving across the screen. There are probably other, maybe better ways to do this, but this is one way to do it. I just wanted to see if I could do things with percentages instead of pixels so that I would get closer to the responsive design that I want. And this actually works pretty well. On the left and right button, I changed the cursor to a pointer. The overflow really needs to be set to hidden to give this the appearance that I want. Each slot, there's 5 of them in my slide container, is to 20%, floating left, so they stick next to each other. The image has a padding of 20% top and bottom and 33% on the side. Now this one I can change and make it 10 or 15% on the slide, and then I can change the image and the image should take up the rest because I'm taking the whole thing because it's a... So here, if I do that, I then have to make my whole thing bigger, my height. And that should work pretty much the same way. And if I do this, I may want to change the padding on my right and left arrows. But you can see that you can make lots of changes using the style sheets, but even though I'm changing things, the JavaScript's not affected. And there we go. Okay, so it's doing pretty much what I want. Let's take a look at my HTML setup first. You've seen the CSS. Let's unsplit the view. So I'm making it responsive using the viewport set to 1. I'm using JQuery from Google. My script is animate.js. I have a master style sheet for some of the colors and fonts, and then the local style sheet for this page. I was using the material icons, but I don't actually need them because I downloaded the images for the left and right arrows. So my class is a container. The main class is my row. My left button is the div on the left-hand side with 1 column. Now I should have, if I were doing this as a real page, not simply an exercise, I'd have a media query where I made these invisible and put in a row with 2 right above the image, but I didn't get quite that carried away. Then I have my center with a class of column 10, and inside the center I have my ID of the slide container, and this is what I set to the 500%. In each of these places, which I've set to 20% because it's 20% of the slide container, I have what I call a slot class. It's 1 slot in the slide container, just the way I'm thinking of it. And then I have the ID on the right-hand side. Now let's look at the JS. So my JavaScript. I've got my var slider equals the # with the hashtag or number # slide container. That's the ID for the slide container. Don't actually need those. I was playing with the way the book was doing it. And all I really need is to count the number of slots because I'm doing it with a percentage. So I have to make sure to increment and count +1 or nothing will ever change because it's going, well, it doesn't work right unless you're changing it, because what you want to do is count needs to reset to 0 whenever you get through the number of slots that you have. Then you have a slider.animate left, and it's doing a negative equals 100%. And when it needs to reset, it's going to increase by 500%, taking it all the way back to the beginning. And I played with the order on this, so I make it slide left. Let me show you what's happening here, because this is when it's resetting. So I'm at the end here. And so it's still, this one doesn't work. So it still slides. And then you, okay, so now it's going to slide, and then the Nessie with the ball picture will just sort of drop into place, and everything resets. So that's what's happening here. It will reset if the count is greater than the number of slots. It resets the count to 0. It goes ahead and it animates it just the way we normally would, so it looks like it's sliding left. And then everything resets instantly, because I set it to a time of 0, of a plus equals 500%, because I'm adjusting the initial one. But normally every time I hit the button, it's going to adjust to the left, negative 100%. If it's positive, it actually moves the image to the right. If it's negative, it actually moves the image towards the left. And I left it only halfway done so that my students would see a pattern of how to code it. And for my students, you have to make it 10 slots. You're going to have to do math. And you're going to have to do both the left and the right hand sides.